Hello, I'm Toycat, welcome back to my second channel video. Today I wanted to talk about this little known virus. You probably haven't heard anything about it. It's called COVID-19 and basically it's been spreading around the world. Here is a heat map. You've probably seen something like this showing which countries it has affected most seriously, and you can see how it's slowly spreading from the obvious China to more parts of Europe, etc. But the thing I don't find interesting is where a virus is spreading. Instead, what I find interesting is the human response to it, which is why I actually put together a map because I couldn't find one online of which countries have closed their borders, because we started with India closing all of their tourist visas, all of their non-official and diplomatic visas for 1 month. We then had the United States jump on and shut their borders to the Schengen area, but since then we've had closure after closure after closure after closure, and again, within just the last 24 hours, we've seen a new batch of closures, which means in the last 72 hours alone, we've seen the world go from pretty open and pretty business as normal to looking like this instead. It's intense, and let's talk about it in today's video, because you might notice how the closure of the United States has been extended now, not just to the Schengen area, but to European countries as a whole. Indeed, if you have heard something in the news, just today we saw that the US actually full on extended their travel ban to the UK and Ireland. And it's kind of a weird thing because it's not actually necessarily a ban from the border with the European countries. It is a ban on Europeans from those countries. Notably, again, you can see the announcement from Pence actually very much says right down here that Mr. Pence explained that American citizens and legal residents could still return. So flights are still being operated. There is still a way to get between the countries, but with the kind of weird little exception of but Europeans, including now the UK, can't get there. Effectively a full travel ban for Europeans in Europe going to and from the United States. Very weird, very strange, concerning times we're living in on that level. Also as well as that, we started to see much more interesting border crossings being shut, such as the Balkan countries, including Albania, including Romania, Serbia, shutting down borders to prevent the spread of the thing. Again, that's a lot of countries. Add that to the fact that Denmark and the Czechs had sealed their borders. Poland announced just after I released my video that they would be doing it too. There are no flights in and out of Poland besides private charter flights. If you want to get into Poland, you have to be a Polish citizen and you have to arrange your own way home, which is quite, it's another level above other countries. As well as that, though, Ukraine has closed their borders to foreigners for 2 weeks. Again, any foreigners, any non-Ukrainian national will not be allowed into Ukraine. It's like allowing people to return home, but otherwise not allowing new people into their country. Then we have Saudi Arabia, this one's even crazier, suspending all international flights. This is, again, a very drastic move for the region. The Middle East seems to be second most affected after the European regions now, and as a result, we've seen Kuwait close, we've seen Israel close, Oman as well, but now Saudi Arabia has joined that club. Vietnam has even started turning away Western tourists. Basically, Europeans are banned in Vietnam, as well as Thailand too, by the way, but Thailand and Vietnam have closed their borders to Europeans, and then it's crazy enough because Russia has supposedly limited flights, and this is the reason I wanted to make this video, is just kind of combat the disinformation that I actually thought for a while that this meant that oh yeah, Russia is limiting flights, they're closing their borders to Europeans. It's actually a bit more complex. It's kind of they're closing their flights, but only to non-capital city airports, which are the major ones which have flights with Russia anyway, or Moscow anyway. So yeah, Moscow and every major airport, also because Geneva is exempt as well. So it's okay, so pretty much there's going to be still 30 flights between Europe and Russia. That's not really limiting it too much, although Russia is hard to access without a visa anyway, so it's kind of okay, it's not really a big measure. But what I do find interesting is the fact that as well as all of these countries, which they're fun little things by themselves, you might say, the kind of rumors coming out of this I also find fascinating. Hey, the top US general in South Korea suggests that he's fairly certain that the North Korea has the virus. We can't know for sure, it's a closed country, but that is insane that it's spread to even the country which has always had closed borders before even all of this. As a result of this, we've seen Mexico even consider, again, this is something you see a lot in clickbait online, but Mexico has been considering closing the border. The reality of the situation is that the deputy health secretary has said authorities would consider mechanisms to control the flow of people entering. Again, realistically, it's saying we will consider at some point maybe sort of shutting down people in some places. People are using it as a haha, show the US, but it's well, I mean, actually, it's kind of a different thing. But you know what? Let's jump on that train and be haha, maybe Mexico will pay for the wall now, am I right? Haha, I'm funny. I make topical things based on inaccurate information. I'm the internet now. But yeah, the kind of reality of all of this. By the way, actually, I have to tell you this story because I love I love the kind of aviation side of this. Well, I mean, I hate the aviation side of this because it's so tragic. But as a result of all of this, because France is banned from entering the because of the fact that this little map right here shows that European citizens can't enter the US right now. Air Tahiti Nui, basically a French Polynesian airline that flies from Paris to French Polynesia, very far apart territories because France, Empire, and all that. Basically because it can't stop in the US because they're European people can't go through there. They're operating it now as a non-stop flight, which makes it the longest in the world, as well as the longest domestic flight because it's between France and France. Which means, yeah, something we suggested wouldn't be possible for the sake of videos a long time ago actually is now possible. The world's longest flight is operating as like an indirect consequence of this, and that, again, just from the aviation side of things, is like, ooh, that's kind of cool. If you like travel, hey, longest flight in the world is operating for a little bit while there's a ban between the US and France, which is leading to a ban between the US and Tahiti, which is leading to the situation where a flight now has to make the longest journey in the world, beating it takes 20 hours, by the way, which is insane amount of time spent on a plane, beating out the current longest flight, which in case you're curious is from New York City all the way to Singapore, which again was already like an insane, oh Jesus, that's a weird thing that they've done. But yeah, the fact that we've now got an even longer flight just goes to show people are like, this is really, this is good for the world. The fact that nobody's flying, and it's like, yes, this is good for the world. The fact that the world economy is shutting down, the fact that borders and the flow of people is shutting down between them, this is good news. Yeah, but no, that is sarcasm in case you don't know. Basically, this is something which is evolving so fast, and it doesn't seem to be slowing down anytime soon. I imagine by the time I release this video, I'll keep you updated in the comments, by the time I release this video, this map will have already been inaccurate. I'll share it with you anyway if you want to see it. I'll try and link it down below. It doesn't have a link for me to share it, but this is a very fast evolving situation. Oh, and in case you're curious, this isn't a map without New Zealand. They're just like off to the side over here. New Zealand's there. They're just in purple and slightly too big to fit on the screen, or slightly too to the side to fit on the screen. I'm sorry, New Zealand. I didn't want to cut you off. They made me do it. But yeah, basically what I'm trying to say of this is that the world is going through something so fast we haven't seen in a while, and there's two ways to look at that. Because for the again, the human response to this is the geographic response, the border shutting down. This is something that is crazy because again, within the EU, a lot of countries. I mean, if you look at if we read about Denmark, Poland, and Czechs, they are obviously doing something kind of against the EU recommendations of just like, we're shutting down. And EU's like, it's not necessary. Nope, we're doing it anyway. The fact that so many countries, especially within Europe, shut down so fast, it's a very interesting thing about what that means for this, because again, whether that slows it down or not, I imagine not really, because nationals of the country can still fly in and out. So they're really only like cutting it in half, because any foreigners can't come in to, say, Poland, but Polish people can still come home, even if they picked up the infection in, say, Italy or in, wherever else in the world. My point of this is that there is this kind of weird situation where the world is shutting down at a rate we haven't seen since the Spanish flu. Again, I looked into this because I was like, you know what? This must happen all the time. And there are certain measures, like the UK has delayed our general, our elections that were going to be in May. They delayed them a year, and it's like, well, that's happened before, like 20 years ago. But as far as like this many countries all shutting down their borders in simultaneous kind of like in synchronized timing, it's pretty nutty. That's why it's seen as worse than 9/11 for the airlines. And yeah, what I wanted to talk about is the kind of case thing, because you might have seen how, again, if you look at the number, if you look at the map, it's like, oh yeah, this this clearly got worse in Europe fast. We even saw that be said by the WHO, the World Health Organization. But if you actually look at the thing right here and you're like, oh yeah, well, it's still a China issue, right? Here's the thing. The total number of cases in China has been the highest. The number of new cases you see per day in China are significantly going down. And something I find even more crazy than that is the fact that most of those people have recovered. Now, not only is this like, oh yeah, well, it's, they've got like more people in it's more people per million in Italy than it was in China, but now it's literally more people have it as a total number in Italy than they do in China. Iran is catching up, South Korea is catching up, Spain and Germany are on the rise like crazy. This is a thing that is spreading very, very quickly, and it is spreading especially quickly around, again, Spain, Germany, France, the big European countries, because they're just very big. But if you look at per million people, you can see how it's actually spreading pretty much all over Europe, with Switzerland being, of all places, one of the worst affected, with Norway, with Denmark, with Sweden, Slovenia, Estonia, Austria, all these countries have huge numbers of cases per million, which is actually why if you look at the UK, we're actually very low down on this list of per million people, because people think about epidemics in terms of total numbers that it has instead of the thing. There's a lot of like misinformation about this. In case you're curious, a lot of people asked, so I want to be clear with this now. This is Worldometer. It's a good way to like track the stats in this one. You can see a lot of interesting stuff here that I want to dive into at least a little bit for this video, because I like looking into the facts of these sorts of things. And yeah, you can look at this kind of like a Plague Inc. feed if you want and be like, Albania has closed its land and sea borders, and they'll only be remaining open for the transportation of goods. There have been 2 new cases in California, 2 new deaths in New York State. There have been 49 new cases in Canada. There have been, you can see it like Spain imposes a complete lockdown. Martial law has been imposed. Italy's health system is overwhelmed. You can see it like happen like that, and I think it's fascinating. You know, like if you want to look at it like Plague Inc., but if you want to look at it on the human level and just kind of like work out how is this actually going, the best graph to me that shows it's kind of spread is the fact that like, oh yeah, we were here and then we were kind of like on the downward hill, but now we're entering a second peak. In the last 10 days alone, from March 3rd, where again 38,000 cases, to now, you can see how it's pretty much doubled that in terms of number of people that have it. That is pretty crazy. You know, if you look at as like total cases, it's like, yep, same kind of trend. We're heading towards a second peak. But in case people, you know, because a lot of people are going to try and tell you this is scary, keep watching the news to find out more. If you keep watching these videos, then I'll keep on scaring you. But my goal of this video is not to scare you, is instead actually to let you know that if you look at China's rate, it was very scary for a while. We were like, oh god, China's messed up, right? Look at those cases. Look at the daily new cases in China and how there were thousands at one point. The same as roughly in Italy right now. But you can, with 14,000 being diagnosed in one day. But you can see how it slowly dripped off after that because whatever you want to blame it on, or, you know, you could even say it's China underreporting. And, you know, we can't confirm it's not. I mean, I can't be like, oh yeah, the data lies. Although it'd be weird if China let it get to this big and then they stop reporting. Like, why would they lie? You know, why would they tell the truth and then start lying there? Unless they lied the whole way through, in your opinion. But then it's like, but why would you lie this specifically? It's a very weird lie to tell because now China is trying to help other countries in the world. But as well as that, you can be like, okay, so if you look at the same graph, you know, like again, the way it works is there's like a huge uptick in cases, and then it levels off eventually. You can see how like the good news is, at least for other countries, at least for the, you know, Italy's of the world, the second furthest along in that kind of thing. It's like, it looks like they're just on their, you know, their rise up, but the hope is that eventually they level off. Again, that whether that happens or not is yet to be seen. I mean, they did it could have been the peak is already there. I don't imagine it is. I imagine there's a long way to go. But yeah, you can see of every country they're heading towards the same kind of thing where like, oh yeah, they peak up and then the peak just suddenly is going to make a, you know, thing to the right. But maybe that changes in a while. All I can say is that every country is going through kind of unprecedented measures to contain this, and the real hope in this is kind of like Spanish flu, which was forgotten for a very long time. Most of the stories about Spanish flu only came up again. The hope is that most countries eventually fix this, because even though it looks scary to see how 3,500 new cases of this appeared in Italy yesterday, it looks scary to be like 1,400 in Iran, and, you know, like if you add all these cases together, it's a huge amount in just the last 24 days, right? It seems super scary when you just kind of look at it like that. But if you look at it in another way, if we look at the total number of people recovered, you can be like, oh, yeah, a lot of people are getting better. You can be like, oh, if we look at, active cases, you can see how 4 countries, Gibraltar's not a country, 4 countries or regions have fixed it. Nepal only had 1, Jordan only had 1, but Macau actually did go from having 10 cases, 10 people who came from Wuhan, China, in case you're curious, and they managed to fix things by, again, they shut things down, etc., etc., or even all the casinos in a place where money comes from gambling, and yeah, they went from having 10 confirmed cases to everyone recovering, and it all being okay. Obviously, when you're talking about, you know, the number of cases that are looking more like, you know, in the case of the USA, 3,000. That's not going to happen without a few of the big red column coming out there. But yeah, the hope is that every country is going to get to that point where they start slouching downwards. And whether it happens or not, I guess is yet to be seen. But it is, you know, we're in the scariest phase right now. And if people, you know, just clean their hands, if people socially distance, if people follow the things that we have seen be successful in these other countries, things will go well. This is an optimistic message, is not the way to get people to watch more of your videos and be like, hey, check out my video tomorrow where I talk about more of this, because this is probably my last video on the coronavirus, because unless there is a literal global shutdown that beats even this, like when we see another major few country, I mean, like but beyond the US, like what other major country can shut down that's as big of an impact? Like if we see all of North America shut down, if we see the world shut down, that might be interesting. But overall, I'd say this is, to me, I'm gonna stake it right now. We are very close to the peak, as it looks from the data. If we aren't very close to the peak, then you know what, we're all gonna die. But I don't actually think that's what's gonna happen. It can be easy to say it that way, but I think the reality is the world is going through a little bit of a thing right now. There's gonna be some deaths. How many deaths? Some. Quite a few more than would be ideal otherwise. But the current situation has huge impacts. By the way, I found a map that actually does show just travel restrictions. So, Russia's like restriction on Europe, or like, China's obvious restrictions, and, it's all covered here. Pretty much most of the world's on board with that, with, South America and, like Western Europe, as well as, like Africa being exceptions. Although, again, this doesn't include countries that we've covered, so who knows if you want to believe the International Air Transport Association. I don't trust IATA, that's for sure. But the world economy is going to take a pretty medium-sized hit. I mean, already shares are down, but like stock markets, they always have crashes. It's likely going to come back to normal. Who knows when? But it's a matter of time, right? The FTSE's down even 28%. That's the UK stock market index. UK companies are down by quite a bit, a huge amount, in fact. Like, any money you had, it's down by just over a quarter right now. But if we look at, the amount of growth countries are going to have, it's gone down a little bit. I mean, the world growth is going down from like 3-ish% to 2.5-ish%, and that's probably going to go down a little bit more than that, in the end, realistically. A lot of countries are going to be pushed like right towards the edge, like Italy's next to a recession, Germany was already pretty close to a recession, the UK dealing with some things, I don't know if you've heard about it in the news as well, but travel is going to be the thing that's hit the hardest, and that is because all of these people are, not only are there lots of flights being cancelled, so for instance, I have a flight from Paris to America next month. And as well as that, I also had a flight from Denmark to Hong Kong. I can't take the first one, likely can't take the second one. These are airlines having to give me my money back because for obvious reasons. Airlines are having to give money back. They're refunding and losing money for flights that they're still having to operate, or costs they still have to have. They're not getting new bookings. I mean, 98.1% down in Asia Pacific from the US, and there's lots of other places I imagine at the same level. They're not getting much new money, and the amount of money they're leaking just through like all these plane leases, etc. Because airlines, they try to make a profit by selling X number of seats on a plane. That's a lot harder when demand is down 98%. That's a lot harder when even demand's only down by 32% or 23%. It's still very, very hard to make that work. And just, I don't know, long story short, things are gonna, the big hit of this is how this affects the thing, and the world. And I want to know there's kind of like two outcomes this can go to. Like, this will be another, like bird flu, avian flu, blah, blah, blah. This can be another one of those things, but a little bit worse. Or is it a Spanish flu that we divert and manage not to kill millions of people with? I think realistically it is going to be the situation where, again, when you look back at pandemics and how bad they seemed at the time, most of them seem pretty bad. I mean, this seems worse now, but I mean, recency bias or whatever. Things that are happening now seem more serious than things that happened in the past. We don't have hindsight yet to know if we're at the peak or if this is just the beginning. But what I can say is that, given, China's recovery, Korea and Japan, their relative recovery, the fact that Japan and Korea used to be super infected, Hong Kong, these relative recoveries in comparison to the world, these do give some hope that, like, there is a leveling off at some point kind of that takes into play. And I hope that continues because, seeing a lot of people die, seeing the healthcare system being under strain, seeing the world fall to its knees is not a good thing for anyone. Even if someone's like, oh, closed borders are good, eh? We proved it. I mean, just saying, North Korea, am I right? Yeah, showed you who's boss. But yeah, I don't think closed borders are the answer. I think they're not even that useful. I think they're a great way to show the importance, and they're a great way to say, stop going on holidays where you're likely going to hang out in public. Hey, actually stay inside. It's actually serious. I think ways to communicate how serious things are to the public are kind of limited. And if this is the way to do that, this is the way to do that. I hope you'll enjoy this video though. Again, I'm going to try and resist making a video on Corona or whatever. I said the name for it now, demonetized. But I want to move on to other things. So you want to hear me talk about exclusive economic zones? great time to talk about it, right? So that's probably what my next video is going to be. Look forward to that. Anyway, thank you for watching. Third channel, no, second channel, don't care. I mean, I clearly care enough to get the name wrong. I clearly don't care if that's what I'm doing. Anyway, I hope you have a wonderful day. Stay safe. Keep your distance from other people. The introverts are rising again, is all I'm saying. You know? You think it's so great to go out in public and sit in a room with 100 other people. Well, now that's illegal. I mean, not in the UK, but now that's against the rules. So, yeah, this is what I say to you extroverted people. Live my lifestyle now. Sit behind a computer and talk about maps. So what you can do for the next... actually, I'm gonna chill. Just goodbye. Stay safe, for real.